Haimiya Senpai, who is known as the scariest person at school because of her cold and rude attitude toward everyone, is, for some reason, incredibly kind to me and treats me very gently. At this school, there was one name almost everyone knew, and not in a good way. Haimiya, a second year, had built a reputation that made people step aside the moment she appeared. No one wanted to get on her bad side. On the complete opposite end was Cross, a first year who couldn't say no to anyone. He was the kind of student who ended up doing extra work just because others knew he wouldn't refuse. And once again, he found himself stuck cleaning the infirmary alone while his classmates slipped away without guilt. They joked about how dependable he was, but to Cross, it didn't feel like a compliment. Deep down, he just wished he had the courage to push back even once. While he was quietly dealing with that frustration, the curtain in the infirmary suddenly slid open. From behind it, Haimiya stepped out. The atmosphere instantly changed. Her expression was sharp, her voice cold, and without hesitation, she told the noisy students to leave, not politely, but with a threat that sounded serious enough for everyone to freeze. Within seconds, the same students who had been laughing were apologizing and rushing out. Watching this, it was easy to understand why everyone feared her. Cross, who had seen her around before because of his committee duties, stiffened. He knew she often skipped class and rested here, but he had never been this close to her presence when she was like this. Then, something unexpected happened. The tension disappeared from her face, replaced by a calm, almost gentle smile as she looked directly at him. She spoke to him normally, even kindly, asking if he had been left alone to clean again. The sudden shift was so overwhelming that Cross couldn't process it. His brain basically shut down, and the next thing he knew, he had fainted on the spot. The next day, that moment kept replaying in his head. He started wondering if maybe everyone had misunderstood her. Maybe she wasn't actually as scary as people said. But that thought didn't last long. As soon as he saw her in the hallway, glaring at students blocking the way and scolding them without holding back, all his doubts rushed back. It felt like confirmation that her reputation wasn't exaggerated after all. Still, the moment she noticed him, everything changed again. Her expression softened, and she greeted him like it was the most natural thing in the world. She even asked if he wanted to walk to school with her. That alone was enough to draw attention. People around them stared, confused at the sight of someone like Cross casually standing next to someone like Haimiya. Even Cross himself couldn't fully understand what was happening. Gathering what little courage he had, he asked her directly why she treated him so differently. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned in slightly, teasing him with a question of her own, which only made his heart race faster. For a brief moment, his thoughts went in a completely different direction, wondering if there was something more behind her behavior. But she quickly brushed it off with a simple explanation, pointing out how he was always cleaning the infirmary. Before he could fully process that answer, the moment ended as they hurried towards school. Walking together felt strange for Cross. There was a mix of happiness and confusion that he couldn't sort out. He got so distracted that he bumped into other students. They apologized quickly and tried to leave, but Haimiya stepped in immediately. Her expression turned serious again, and she made sure they apologized properly. The shift in her presence was immediate and intense. The other students didn't argue. They apologized sincerely and left as fast as they could. Once they were gone, she checked on genuine concern, noticing that his hand was slightly injured. Without hesitation, she took him to a nearby park to clean it and even put a bandage on it herself. The way she handled everything was careful and gentle, completely different from how she had just acted moments earlier. For Cross, the contrast was almost too much to handle. Being that close to her, noticing small details like the design on the bandage, it all made him more aware of her in a way he wasn't used to. Because of the delay, they arrived late to school and were immediately stopped by a teacher. Cross tried to explain, but the teacher wasn't interested in excuses. Before the situation could escalate further, Haimiya responded with a sarcastic comment that only made things worse. The result was predictable. Both of them were assigned after-school cleaning duty. Cross tried to take responsibility, but she dismissed it casually, even saying that walking with him had been fun, as if that alone balanced everything out. That simple comment stuck with him more than anything else. When they reported for cleaning duty later, Cross couldn't deny that part of him was actually happy about it, even if it meant extra work. It also meant spending more time with her. At the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had caused trouble. But when she called out to him and casually said that situations like this weren't so bad, it eased his worries instantly. Without thinking, he admitted that he was having fun too. For a moment, it felt like things were going perfectly, but that didn't last. A group of other students showed up, turning the quiet task into a noisy mess. Cross felt his expectations drop immediately. He had hoped for a chance to talk more with her, but now that opportunity was gone. Watching her reaction, he assumed she was annoyed
annoyed by the crowd, but when he tried to comfort her, she simply said that wasn't the case, leaving him even more confused. Before he could figure it out, one of the boys accidentally splashed water all over her. The mood changed instantly. Her expression darkened in a way that made it clear this wasn't something to joke about. The boys panicked and apologized repeatedly, cleaning up as fast as they could before escaping the scene. Seeing that side of her again reminded Cross that her reputation didn't come from nowhere. Once they were alone again, she brushed it off, even joking about how bad her situation looked. She quickly adjusted and got back to cleaning like nothing had happened. Cross, still trying to keep things normal, ended up offering her his jacket after noticing her soaked clothes. She accepted it with a small smile, acknowledging his thoughtfulness. That moment felt simple, but for him, it carried more weight than expected. As they continued cleaning, Cross couldn't let go of the earlier conversation. He asked her again what she had meant before being interrupted. This time, she just avoided the answer with a playful response, leaving him unsatisfied. Still, despite everything, the time they spent together felt genuinely enjoyable. That feeling lasted right up until the moment he accidentally walked into the infirmary while she was changing. The situation turned chaotic instantly. He panicked, apologized, and tried to escape, but she caught up to him and delivered a warning in a tone that was both soft and terrifying at the same time. He promised to forget what he saw, even though he knew that was impossible. The next day, that incident weighed heavily on him. When she walked past him without responding to his greeting, his worst fears kicked in. He was convinced he had crossed a line and ruined everything. It genuinely bothered him more than he expected. He realized that somewhere along the way, her opinion of him had started to matter. Later, when he finally found her again, everything cleared up in the simplest way possible. She hadn't ignored him on purpose, she just couldn't see or hear him properly. The relief he felt was immediate and overwhelming. It might have been a small misunderstanding, but to him, it meant everything. Thinking about it, this is probably the point where you can tell Cross is already way more invested in this than he realizes. From there, their interactions started to feel more natural. When they exchanged contact information, it marked a clear shift in their relationship. It wasn't just occasional conversations anymore. Now there was a direct connection between them. For Cross, even something as simple as seeing her name saved on his phone felt like a big step. At the same time, he began to notice how others talked about her. Rumors spread easily, and most of them painted her in a negative light. When he heard that she might be smoking, it genuinely worried him. But when he checked for himself, the truth turned out to be something completely harmless. It made him realize how easily people misunderstood her. Sitting with her afterward, watching her casually feed the fish and make offhand comments, Cross started to see more sides of her personality. Some of it was confusing, some of it didn't make sense, but none of it felt fake. She was just being herself, regardless of what others thought. Back home, things took another turn when his sister handed him 2 movie tickets. The idea of inviting someone immediately brought Haimiya to mind, even though he tried to deny it at first. After going back and forth in his head, he finally worked up the courage to ask her. The timing was awkward, and the conversation didn't go smoothly, but in the end, she agreed without hesitation. That moment hit harder than he expected. It wasn't just about going to a movie anymore. It felt like something more, even if he couldn't clearly define it yet. Interestingly, she seemed just as flustered on her side, even though she never showed that side of herself at school.
By the time the day ended, Cross found himself asking his sisters for help with what to wear. It was something he would normally never do, but this time felt different. As they teased him and helped him prepare, it became obvious that this wasn't just a casual outing for him. And honestly, even if he doesn't fully realize it yet, this is probably the start of something that's going to change his entire high school life. On the day of the outing, Cross showed up way earlier than he needed to. He had put effort into his appearance for once, fixing his hair and choosing clothes more carefully than usual. Even so, standing there alone, he couldn't stop overthinking. He kept wondering if he looked too eager or if his outfit was too plain. It was his first time meeting Haimiya outside of school, and that alone made everything feel different. The pressure from his sister's advice wasn't helping either. Instead of calming him down, it just gave him more things to worry about. While he was lost in his thoughts, a familiar voice snapped him back to reality. Haimiya had arrived. The moment he saw her, everything else faded. She looked completely different from how she did at school, more relaxed, but somehow even more mature. Her outfit suited her perfectly, and for a few seconds, Cross couldn't even respond properly. He just stood there, trying to process it. She noticed he had arrived early and pointed it out casually, but it turned out she wasn't exactly on time either. Her excuse about misreading the train schedule sounded a bit forced, but Cross didn't question it. Instead, they decided to head out together. As they walked side by side, Cross couldn't stop being aware of her presence. It felt strange to be with her like this, outside the usual school setting, and part of him
him wondered if he even belonged there. Trying to follow his sister's advice, he started a conversation. He asked simple questions about movies and how she usually spent her time, but her responses were short and didn't really lead anywhere. The conversation felt stiff, and no matter how hard he tried, it didn't flow naturally. Even small moments, like standing on the escalator together, felt awkward. As they reached the theater, the tension hadn't improved. If anything, it had gotten worse. Haimiya excused herself to go to the restroom, but the look on her face made Cross uneasy. Left alone, his thoughts immediately went in a negative direction. He started wondering if she was already regretting coming, or if he had done something wrong without realizing it. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. Once the movie started, the atmosphere changed again, but not in the way he expected. Instead of being bored or uninterested, Haimiya was unusually quiet. At first, Cross thought she might just be focused on the movie, but then he noticed something off. When a particularly intense scene appeared, he realized she was actually trembling. It took him a moment to understand what was happening. Haimiya, the person everyone feared, was genuinely scared of horror movies. Without saying much, she grabbed his hand tightly, clearly struggling to handle it. Seeing her like that surprised him more than anything else that day. When she admitted she couldn't take it anymore, he immediately suggested they leave. There was no hesitation. They both stepped out of the theater, leaving the movie behind without a second thought. Outside, she quickly apologized, blaming herself for ruining the experience. Cross tried to reassure her, but it was obvious she felt bad about it. When he asked why she had agreed to come in the first place, her answer was simple but honest. She said she wanted to. That was all. It wasn't about the movie. It was about spending time together. That answer hit differently. It wasn't dramatic or complicated, but it was enough to change the mood completely. From there, the date started to feel more natural. Instead of forcing things, they just decided to continue the day in a way that suited both of them. When Cross suggested going to an arcade, Haimiya immediately agreed, mentioning there was something she wanted to see there. Before heading in, Cross took a moment to collect himself. He reminded himself to relax and enjoy the time instead of overthinking every detail. But just as he was starting to feel a bit more comfortable, another situation interrupted them. While he was away briefly, two guys approached Haimiya. Their intentions were obvious, and they didn't bother hiding it. Haimiya shut them down immediately, as expected, but they didn't take the rejection well. The situation escalated quickly, and for a moment, Cross hesitated. He was scared, and it showed. But then, something shifted. Instead of backing away, he stepped in front of her. Even he didn't fully understand how he managed to do it, but he stood his ground and confronted them. His voice wasn't steady, but it was enough. He created an opening and quickly suggested they run. Without waiting, he grabbed her hand and pulled her away from the situation. They didn't stop until they were far enough to feel safe. Only then did the tension start to fade. Haimiya looked at him differently after that. She thanked him sincerely, her usual teasing tone replaced with something softer. It was clear that what he did mattered more than he realized. Honestly, this was probably the first time Cross acted without overthinking, and it changed the dynamic between them more than anything else so far. After calming down, they continued to the arcade. Compared to everything that had happened earlier, the atmosphere there felt light. Haimiya quickly got excited over a specific plush toy, showing a side of herself that most people would never expect. She was genuinely invested in getting it, full of confidence at first, but that confidence didn't last long. No matter how many times she tried, the claw machine just wouldn't cooperate. Her frustration built up quickly, and Cross could practically feel the tension rising again. Watching her struggle, he quietly analyzed the situation and gave it a try himself when she stepped away. To his own surprise, he managed to win the toy on his first attempt. When she came back and saw it, her reaction was immediate disbelief. It turned into determination, and she jumped back into the challenge with even more energy, but the result didn't change. Eventually, her frustration reached a point where she decided to involve the staff. The way she handled it was almost impressive. She switched from intimidating pressure to a completely different approach, using a soft and polite tone that got immediate results. The staff adjusted the machine, and this time she finally succeeded. The shift in her behavior was so smooth that it left Cross genuinely impressed. But what stood out the most wasn't how she got the toy. It was what she did next. Instead of keeping it, she gave it to him, simply because he had mentioned liking it earlier. It wasn't a big gesture on the surface, but the effort behind it made it meaningful. Cross, in return, offered to swap their toys. It was a small idea, but it created a moment that felt more personal than anything else that day. When she joked about them matching like a couple, it caught him completely off guard. He didn't know how to respond, but the thought stuck with him. As the day came to an end, the energy between them had clearly changed. Walking together in the evening felt different from how it started. There was less tension, less uncertainty. When she thanked him for inviting her and said she had fun, it felt genuine. Cross tried to express his thoughts as well, admitting that his impression of her had changed.
He had always seen her as someone distant and almost unreachable, but now he realized there were sides of her he had never imagined. At the same time, he acknowledged that he still didn't really know her. That honesty seemed to resonate with her. She admitted something similar, saying she didn't fully understand him either. It was a simple exchange, but it felt like a step forward. As they reached the station, Cross remembered his sister's advice. He knew this was probably his chance to say something more direct, something honest. He tried, but at the last moment he backed out. Instead of saying what he really felt, he said something safe and completely missed the opportunity. He immediately regretted. Watching her leave, he felt frustrated with himself. It wasn't the outcome he had imagined, but even then, something had clearly changed. For the first time, his daily routine didn't feel empty anymore. There was someone he could look forward to seeing. That small realization mattered more than his failed attempt to say the right words. As she disappeared through the station gate, he stood there thinking about how things had been until now. His life had been quiet, almost uneventful, but now it felt like something new had started. And even if he wasn't confident yet, he at least understood one thing clearly. If he wanted things to change, he had to put in the effort. So instead of overthinking it again, he did something simple. He sent her a message thanking her for the day. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. On the other side, as she read it, her expression softened without anyone there to see it.
After reaching home, Haimiya unlocked the door, and for a brief moment, everything felt quiet again. The same small plush keychain hung from her keys, gently swaying as she stepped inside. There was still a faint blush on her face, and without even realizing it, she was smiling to herself. She walked straight into her room, dropped her bag without care, and fell onto her bed. It wasn't exhaustion exactly, but more like a mix of relief and lingering excitement from the day. After a few seconds, she picked up the plush toy they had exchanged and looked at it closely. The way she held it made it clear that it wasn't just a random prize anymore. It had already become something meaningful to her. The next day at school, Cross went back to his usual routine, walking through the corridor while thinking about his tasks for the day. His mind was split between homework, committee duties, and the usual expectation that he would end up doing most of the work alone again. But even while thinking about all that, his thoughts kept drifting back to Haimiya. He wondered if she would be in the infirmary like usual. Before he could go any further, she suddenly appeared behind him and startled him on purpose. The reaction was immediate. He jumped, completely caught off guard, while she just smiled like it was the most normal thing to do. They ended up walking to the infirmary together, and even in that short walk, she casually teased him about what he had been thinking earlier. Cross panicked because the truth was obvious. He had been thinking about her, but instead, he awkwardly denied it. She didn't push too much, but it was clear she noticed something. When they entered the infirmary, Aya-sensei immediately picked up on the situation. Seeing the two of them together, she asked a simple question that somehow made things awkward instantly. Were they really that close? Haimiya tried to play it off confidently, but when Cross hesitated, she quickly pressured him into agreeing. The way she switched from casual to slightly threatening was so natural that Cross didn't even have time to think before going along with it. As the conversation continued, Cross almost revealed that she had been scared during the movie, but one sharp look from her was enough to shut that down immediately. He quickly changed his words, and somehow the situation moved on without exposing her secret. Still, Aya-sensei seemed to understand more than they were saying out loud. Then she noticed the plush hanging from Cross's bag. That one small detail changed the atmosphere again. Cross tried to brush it off, but Haimiya immediately teased him, pointing out that it matched hers. When she jokingly suggested that he liked her because of it, Cross panicked and denied it too quickly. That reaction didn't go the way he expected. Instead of ending the conversation, it made things worse. Haimiya's mood shifted, and she questioned why he would have a problem with matching with her. At that point, Cross realized he had messed up and decided to be honest instead. He admitted that he actually liked having something matching with her, but he had been embarrassed to say it openly. That answer changed everything. Her irritation disappeared almost instantly, replaced with a quiet, satisfied smile. She even went a step further and said she would also wear it intentionally from now on. It was a small moment, but it carried more meaning than either of them openly acknowledged. From the side, Aya-sensei watched everything unfold and came to her own conclusion without saying it directly. After finishing their work, Cross left the infirmary, but not before hearing Haimiya casually say, "See you tomorrow," again. It was the same phrase as before, but this time it hit even harder. Once he stepped outside, he had to stop for a second just to calm himself. That one simple line had way more impact on him than it should have. Inside, after he left, Aya-sensei pointed out something obvious. Haimiya seemed to be enjoying school more than before. She tried to deny it, but the evidence was was right there. Even the matching plush on her bag made it clear that something had changed. As she walked through the hallway holding that small item, it felt like her once dull routine had started to gain a bit of color. Around this time, another character starts to play an important role. Tanizaki Toya, a classmate of Cross's, was the complete opposite of him. He was outgoing, athletic, and naturally good at interacting with people. The kind of person who could walk into any situation and fit in immediately. When he helped Cross during class by covering for him, it seemed like a simple act, but it created a connection that Cross wasn't used to.
At first, that connection wasn't entirely comfortable. Tanizaki pointed out, without thinking much about it, that Cross wasn't good at speaking in front of others. It wasn't meant to hurt, but it still did. Sometimes honesty hits harder when it's said casually. Still, despite that, Tanizaki treated him like a friend without hesitation. During lunch, that gap between them became more obvious. Tanizaki openly called him a friend, while Cross was still trying to process how that even happened. But even then, there was no bad intention behind it. If anything, Tanizaki's approach was straightforward and genuine in a way that Cross wasn't used to. Then, as expected, the topic shifted to Haimiya. When Tanizaki brought her up, the reaction was immediate. Cross became noticeably flustered, while Tanizaki shared his own experience with her. From his perspective, she was exactly as dangerous as the rumors suggested. His story about accidentally hitting her with a basketball only reinforced that image. But before the conversation could go any further, Haimiya herself appeared. The timing couldn't have been worse. She called out to Cross normally, as if nothing was unusual, but Tanizaki's reaction was completely different. He froze on the spot, clearly intimidated. From his perspective, the situation looked completely different from what was actually happening. When Cross left with her, Tanizaki was left behind, confused and uneasy, and just before leaving, Haimiya gave him a look that only made things worse for him. It wasn't a friendly expression. It was the kind that made him feel like he had made a serious mistake. From there, things took a more comedic turn. Tanizaki's imagination started running wild, convincing himself that Cross was in danger and needed to be rescued. In reality, nothing like that was happening, but in his mind, it had already escalated into a full situation where he needed to step in as a hero. When he finally burst into the infirmary, expecting the worst, the reality completely contradicted his expectations. Instead of danger, he found a calm and normal environment. That contrast made the whole situation even more absurd. Still, his misunderstanding didn't disappear immediately. He tried to save Cross, whispering suspicious questions and acting like something serious was happening. Haimiya, naturally, didn't appreciate that behavior. Her reaction was quick and direct, and before long, Tanizaki found himself on the receiving end of her irritation. Eventually, things settled down, and the three of them ended up talking normally. That's when Tanizaki finally understood the real situation. There was no hidden conflict or manipulation. It was just a simple dynamic where Cross was helping out, and Haimiya wasn't as unreasonable as the rumors made her seem. Even then, Tanizaki didn't hold back. He quickly inserted himself into their space, making himself comfortable in a way that would normally be annoying, but at the same time, he showed a different side. When Cross defended him and called him his first friend, it shifted Haimiya's perspective slightly. Hearing that, she reacted in her usual teasing way, acting a bit jealous and questioning whether Cross would stop spending time with her now. But Cross, taking it seriously, gave an honest answer. He made it clear that both relationships mattered to him. That response seemed to reach her. She didn't say much, but the way she smiled and lightly patted his head showed that she understood. Honestly, this is where the dynamic starts to get interesting. It's no longer just Cross and Haimiya. Now there's a third person who sees things differently, and that contrast starts revealing more about both of them. Of course, the moment didn't last long. Tanizaki, staying true to his nature, brought in a cockroach as a joke, completely unaware of how bad of an idea that was. The result was immediate and predictable. Haimiya panicked and reacted without holding back, leaving Tanizaki completely defeated. The next day, despite everything, Tanizaki showed up again like nothing had happened. That alone says a lot about him. Even after being on the receiving end of her anger, he didn't avoid her. Instead, he continued acting the same way, which slowly started to break down the distance between them. Later, when Cross stepped away for a while, Haimiya and Tanizaki were left alone. That's when things took a more serious turn. She directly questioned his intentions, wanting to know why he was getting close to Cross so quickly. For the first time, Tanizaki dropped his usual carefree attitude and answered honestly. He explained what he had noticed about Cross, how he quietly helped others without expecting anything in return, and how he always ended up alone despite that. It wasn't a deep or complicated explanation, but it was genuine.
Hearing that, Haimiya's view of him shifted again. She realized that even though he acted careless most of the time, he paid attention to things that others ignored. That understanding
created a small sense of respect between them. But of course, Tanizaki couldn't leave things at that. As soon as the mood softened, he immediately pushed it in a different direction, teasing her about her behavior towards Cross. The moment he hinted at something romantic, everything collapsed again. The result was immediate. The next thing anyone saw was Tanizaki flying straight toward the fish pond while Haimiya sat there like nothing had happened. When Cross returned and saw that scene, he could only stand there completely confused, trying to understand what had just happened. Back in the infirmary, things were as routine as ever. Cross was quietly cleaning like he always did, while Tanizaki lounged on the sofa scrolling through his phone. Out of nowhere, Tanizaki burst into laughter. It was the kind of random reaction that immediately made Cross look over and ask what was going on. But instead of giving a normal answer, Tanizaki jumped into a completely unrelated topic, talking about how cute girls from Hakata were. Cross didn't even understand how the conversation got there. Tanizaki, fully invested in his own thoughts, started explaining how his favorite actress sometimes used the Hakata dialect and how much he liked the sound of it. He even started mimicking her in a high-pitched voice, getting more excited with every second. Cross just stood there watching this unfold, already tired of where this was going. From there, Tanizaki kept going on about dialects in general, saying they had personality and charm. At one point, he even said he wished he could just get a dialect, like buying some from a store. Cross, being the only reasonable one in that moment, pointed out the obvious, that it didn't work like that. But Tanizaki wasn't done. He brought up the Kansai dialect next, calling it cool and energetic, and the moment that word came up, Cross completely froze. His reaction was so extreme that it almost felt like he had been caught doing something wrong. In his head, everything spiraled instantly. He started imagining how Haimiya would react if he casually said he liked that dialect. For some reason, his brain jumped straight to the worst-case scenario, where she would take it as something more personal and start teasing him endlessly. Instead of answering normally, he avoided the topic entirely. What Cross didn't realize was that Haimiya was right outside the door. She had come to the infirmary as usual, but the moment she overheard the conversation, she stopped. She didn't go inside. Instead, she stood there for a second, processing what she had heard. Then, without saying anything, she turned around and walked away. The expression on her face said everything. It wasn't just embarrassment. There was a mix of frustration and confusion too. And even though she tried to brush it off in her head, saying it didn't matter, it clearly did. Meanwhile, inside, Cross let out a quiet sigh of relief, thinking he had avoided a dangerous situation. Tanizaki, completely unaware of what had just happened, casually added that he thought the Kansai dialect was cute anyway. And then, almost ironically, he said that Haimiya wasn't even around. In reality, she had heard everything. From that point on, the misunderstanding started to grow on its own. Haimiya kept replaying that moment in her head, slowly twisting it into something worse. Even though Cross hadn't actually said anything negative, she convinced herself that he didn't like the way she spoke. By the time she got home, the thought was stuck in her mind. The next morning made it obvious something was off. When Cross greeted her usual, she responded, but something felt different immediately. Her tone was too formal, too stiff. It didn't match how she usually spoke at all. Instead of her usual casual way of talking, she was speaking in a polished, almost unnatural manner. At first, Cross didn't understand what was happening. The conversation felt awkward, like they were strangers trying to be polite instead of friends who had grown comfortable with each other. Even simple topics sounded forced. The more she tried to act normal, the more unnatural it became. It didn't take long for Cross to realize something was wrong. He gathered enough courage to ask her directly if she was okay. That question broke the flow instantly. Her expression changed, and the act slipped for a moment. Then she asked him something completely unexpected. Did he hate the Kansai dialect? That question caught him off guard. He didn't even connect it to what had happened the day before at first. But when she explained that she had overheard the conversation, everything clicked. He realized the situation had turned into a misunderstanding because of his own hesitation. She had taken his silence as rejection, and because of that, she had tried to change herself. That realization hit harder than he expected. Without meaning to, he had made her feel self-conscious about something that was completely natural to her. And now she was standing there, waiting for a clear answer. He tried to respond, but just like before, his words got stuck. Even when he decided to be honest, the pressure made him freeze at the worst moment. Instead of saying what he actually felt, he blurted out something completely useless. And just like that, the situation got worse. Haimiya didn't wait for another explanation. She turned away and started walking, clearly done with the conversation. Cross immediately realized his mistake. This time, he didn't hesitate. He raised his voice and called out to her, forcing himself to say what he should have said said from the start. He admitted that he didn't hate her way of speaking. Yes, it could sound a bit intimidating sometimes, but that was part of who she was. And more than that, he liked it. Not because it was special or different, but because it was hers. That honesty changed everything. She stopped walking. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, her expression softened. The tension that had been building since the previous day finally disappeared. She didn't overreact or make a big deal out of it. She just accepted it in her own way, telling him to stop being so dramatic and to hurry up. Just like that, things went back to normal. Honestly, this was one of those moments where Cross finally stopped overthinking and just said what he actually felt, and it worked way better than anything else he had tried before. After that, the mood between them felt lighter again. She admitted she had been hurt, but also acknowledged that she might have overreacted. It wasn't a big conflict, but the way they handled it showed how much their dynamic had changed. There was more honesty, even if it came with a bit of embarrassment. Of course, that peace didn't last long. Tanizaki, as usual, found a way to bring chaos back. He complained about a teacher, even though it was clearly his own fault for getting in trouble. Then, while walking to class, he pointed out something inappropriate, dragging Cross into another awkward situation. Their reactions were completely different, but in the end, both of them ended up embarrassed in their own way. That moment stuck with Cross more than it should have. Later, during class, his thoughts drifted back to Haimiya, and because of what Tanizaki had said earlier, his mind started going in a direction he wasn't comfortable with. He immediately regretted it, feeling guilty for even thinking that way. Trying to clear his head, he escaped to the infirmary, hoping for some peace. But instead of calming down, things got worse. Haimiya was there, completely relaxed, sitting in a way that made him even more aware of everything he was trying to ignore. His brain basically shut down again. He couldn't even think properly, caught between embarrassment and confusion. Even when he tried to act normal, small moments kept making things worse. Every movement, every glance, it all felt amplified in his head, and the more he tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. When other students made inappropriate comments nearby, it pushed him even further. Hearing someone else talk about her like that triggered something in him. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. There was a mix of discomfort and protectiveness that he didn't fully understand yet. At that point, he couldn't take it anymore. He left the room, trying to get some air and calm himself. Outside, sitting alone near the water, he finally started to relax. But of course, that didn't last either. Haimiya showed up shortly after and sat next to him like it was nothing. She casually offered him a gummy, completely unaware of everything that had been going on in his head. For a moment, things felt normal again. Then Cross noticed something that immediately put him on edge. A group of guys nearby had a clear line of sight towards where Haimiya was sitting. The angle made it possible for them to see something they shouldn't. Without thinking too much, Cross moved. He positioned himself in front of her, blocking their view completely. He didn't explain it, he just acted. From her perspective, though, it looked strange. He suddenly moved closer without any clear reason. Naturally, she questioned it, even teasing him a little, but his expression was too serious for it to be a joke. When she pressed him for an answer, he finally explained. Not smoothly, not confidently, but honestly. He told her he was trying to protect her from being seen like that. For a second, she was silent. Then she laughed. The situation that had felt so serious to him turned into something light for her. She wasn't mocking him. It was more like she found his reaction unexpectedly sincere and a bit cute. After calming down, she thanked him properly. But then she revealed something that completely flipped the situation. She lifted her skirt slightly, just enough to show that she was wearing safety shorts underneath. So when Haimiya casually lifted her skirt to prove her point, he ended up seeing it from the closest possible angle. His mind went completely blank. He didn't even have a proper reaction, just a confused sound slipping out as his brain failed to catch up with what had just happened. At the same time, Himiya's expression started to change. The confidence she had a second ago faded instantly, replaced by pure realization. It took her a moment, but when it hit her, it hit hard. She hadn't worn safety shorts that day. What she thought was a casual way to reassure him turned into one of the most embarrassing mistakes possible. For a few seconds, both of them completely shut down. Neither of them could process the situation properly, so they did the only thing they could think of, avoid it entirely. Haimiya suddenly looked up at the sky and commented loudly about how nice it looked, while Cross flipped himself toward the ground, staring at the fish and talking about how energetic they were. It was obvious to anyone watching that both of them were desperately trying to pretend nothing had happened. After that, things stayed awkward between them for a while. Not Not the kind that breaks everything, but the kind that lingers quietly in the background. The next morning, they walked to school together again, and even though there was still a bit of leftover tension, their usual rhythm slowly came back. When they separated near the lockers, Haimiya casually told him to see her after school, and Cross couldn't hide how happy that made him. But as always, the moment one thing settles, another problem appears. This time, it came from the people around them. While walking through the corridor, Cross overheard other students talking about him and Haimiya. At first, it sounded like normal gossip, but then the tone shifted. People started making assumptions, suggesting there must be some strange reason behind their closeness. Some even implied that something was wrong with Haimiya herself. That hit Cross harder than expected. He had never really paid attention to what others thought before. When he was with her, those things didn't matter. But now, hearing it directly, he started to feel responsible. The thought that people might be talking badly about her because of him didn't sit well at all. For the first time, he began to question whether being close to him was actually causing her trouble. When he asked Tanizaki about it, the answer he got wasn't exactly comforting. Tanizaki bluntly said it was weird, but at the same time, he gave simple advice. If it bothered him that much, he should just ask her directly. The problem was, Cross wasn't confident enough to do that. Meanwhile, over in Haimiya's class, something completely different was happening. When she dropped her things, her classmates immediately helped her without hesitation. There was no fear, no distance, just normal interaction. Seeing that from outside the classroom, Cross realized something important. Haimiya wasn't isolated. She wasn't some unreachable person feared by everyone. She had her own space, her own connections, and her own place where she belonged. And that realization created a new kind of insecurity. Until now, Cross had felt like their connection was something special, something unique, but seeing her like that made him wonder if he had misunderstood everything. Maybe, to her, he was just another friend, someone she was kind to, but not someone particularly important. That thought stayed with him. Later, when they met again in the infirmary, Haimiya, with a soft smile and a slightly shy expression, asked him something simple. Did he want to walk home together? It was exactly what Cross had been hoping for, but instead of saying yes, he hesitated. All the gossip he had heard earlier came rushing back. If people were already talking, then being seen together outside school would only make things worse, and if that led to more rumors about her, then it would be his fault. So he did something that seemed right in his head, but felt completely wrong in reality. He avoided eye contact and gave a weak excuse, saying he had to go home early. Then he left before she could respond properly. From her side, it didn't make sense at all. One moment things were normal, and the next he was pushing her away without an explanation. She was left confused, slightly annoyed, and unable to understand what had suddenly changed. Even later, when she messaged him to check if he was okay, his response was cold and distant, just a simple sticker. No explanation, no effort. That only made things worse. The next day, when she tried to talk to him again, he avoided her once more. That was the break. This time, she didn't let him escape. She cornered him directly, cutting off any chance for him to run away again. The tone of the situation shifted instantly. The usual teasing was gone, replaced with something much more serious. She demanded an answer, and when Cross finally spoke, what he said only made things worse. He told her that she shouldn't spend time with someone like him, that being around him would only cause her trouble. From his perspective, it was a way of protecting her, but from her perspective, it sounded completely different. Her anger wasn't just about what he said, it was about how he said, about how he let other people's opinions control his actions instead of being honest with her. She asked him a question that cut straight to the core. If someone else told him to disappear, would he just accept that too? That moment hit him harder than anything else. Without waiting for his answer, she left, telling him to think properly about why she was angry. After she was gone, the silence felt heavy. Cross couldn't even move at first. He just stood there, trying to process everything. When he finally sat down, it was clear he understood that something had gone very wrong. Back home, his state didn't improve. He looked completely drained, like all his energy had been pulled out of him. Even his younger sisters noticed something was off immediately. When his younger sister confronted him, she didn't take long to figure out what had happened, and instead of comforting him gently, she went straight to the point. She reminded him of something from the past, a time when he had sacrificed something important for her without telling her. Back then, she was grateful, but also upset, not because he helped her, but because he never gave her the chance to decide for herself. That was the key. What Cross thought was kindness was actually one-sided. He made decisions for others without asking them, assuming it was for their sake, but in reality, it took away their choice. Hearing that, everything started to click. He realized that what he had done with Haimiya was the same. He didn't ask her what she wanted. He didn't consider her feelings. He just decided on his own that distancing himself was the right thing, and that's why she got angry. Honestly, this is probably the moment where Cross finally starts understanding the difference between being kind and actually respecting someone. With that realization, his mindset changed. Instead of running away, away, he decided to face the situation properly. For the first time, he stopped hiding behind excuses and prepared himself to be honest. The next day, standing outside the infirmary, he was clearly nervous. Even after thinking everything through, actually facing her was still difficult. But this time, he didn't back out. When he found out she wasn't there, it shook him a bit. For a moment, he thought he might have missed his chance, but there was a small sign left behind, showing that she was waiting in her classroom. That was enough. He headed there, still nervous, still unsure, but determined not to repeat the same mistake. When he finally saw her sitting by the window, calm and quiet, it felt different from before. There was distance now, not physical distance, but emotional. Still, he stepped forward.
He apologized, not half-heartedly, not indirectly, but properly. And for the first time in a while, she actually stopped what she was doing and looked at him. After Cross's apology echoed through the empty classroom, everything went quiet. Haimiya looked at him without any visible emotion and simply said she understood. That single response hit harder than anything else. For a moment, Cross felt like everything was over. He tried to explain himself, but she cut him off, saying she hadn't even wanted an apology in the first place. That line broke him more than rejection would have. Standing there, he felt the distance between them more clearly than ever. It wasn't just physical space, it was the gap that had formed because of his own actions. In his mind, he started accepting the worst outcome. Maybe this was it. Maybe those normal moments, the casual see you tomorrow, the time they spent together, maybe all of that was gone now. But this time, he didn't run. Instead, something shifted. He clenched his fist, forcing himself to stay. He remembered everything, her smile, the way she treated him, the way those small moments had changed his everyday life. He realized he couldn't just let it end like that, not without saying what he actually felt. And for the first time, he didn't hold back. He raised his voice, louder than he had ever had before, and admitted it directly. He told her he had wanted to walk home with her. It wasn't about rumors or other people. It wasn't about what was better or worse. It was simply what he wanted. That confession caught her completely off guard. From there, the words just kept coming. He explained everything, the insecurity he felt after seeing her with her classmates, the way he started doubting his place in her life, the guilt from hearing people talk badly about her because of him, and most importantly, he admitted that he never once asked her how she felt. He had just decided everything on his own. By the time he finished, he wasn't holding anything back anymore. He told her clearly that if she didn't have a problem with it, then he didn't care what others said. He wanted to stay by her side, honestly and openly, not because he thought it was right, but because it mattered to him. At that point, his emotions finally caught up to him. The pressure, the frustration, the fear, all of it came out at once. He didn't even realize he was crying until it was already happening. When he finished, Cross felt completely exposed. He had said everything, and now there was nothing left to hide behind. Embarrassed and overwhelmed, he tried to leave, thinking he had already done enough damage, but she stopped him. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was calm but serious. She asked him why he was crying, and even that question caught him off guard. He didn't have a clear answer. All he could say was that he felt pathetic, like he didn't even understand himself anymore. Instead of pushing him away, she told him to sit down. That small action changed the atmosphere completely. Sitting face to face, she handed him a tissue and finally explained her side. What made her angry wasn't his feelings, it was how he hid them, the way he acted differently, said things that didn't match how normally he was. She had noticed it immediately, but instead of understanding it, it just frustrated her. At the same time, she admitted her own mistake. She hadn't tried to understand him properly either. That frustration turned into harsh words, and she acknowledged that. Then, for the first time since everything started, her expression softened. She smiled. It wasn't teasing or playful at first, just genuine, and she told him directly that she was glad he finally spoke honestly. That one line fixed more than anything else could. Of course, she didn't stay serious for long. The moment the tension eased, she slipped back into her usual teasing self, pointing out how much he must have been thinking about her to end up like this. Cross, already embarrassed, had no way to defend himself. The more he tried, the worse it got. Still, underneath all that teasing, something important was made clear. She didn't care about the rumors. She didn't care about what other people thought of her spending time with him. To her, that wasn't
something worth worrying about. And just as importantly, she corrected his misunderstanding. The idea that she had close friends in her class wasn't exactly accurate. She interacted with them, but it wasn't the same as what she had with him.
That realization settled things in a way Cross hadn't expected. For the first time, he understood that what they had wasn't something he needed to compare or measure. It was its own thing. Then, just as things stabilized, she casually brought up something else: studying. Midterms were coming up, and she asked him if he wanted to study together. The way she said it was simple, but the effect it had on him was immediate. He froze, completely caught off guard. Even after everything that had just happened, she was inviting him to spend more time together. He agreed instantly, almost too quickly, and rushed out to get his things, unable to hide how happy he was. Watching him leave, Haimiya couldn't help but smile. Left alone in the classroom, she leaned slightly, resting her face in her hand, and let that expression linger. The same person everyone saw as intimidating, strict, and unapproachable was sitting there, quietly amused and a little flustered. Kurose and Haimiya sit across from each other with their desks pushed together, finally starting their study session like they had planned. It feels simple, but for Kurose, even this moment carries a bit of excitement. He admits honestly that he struggles with chemistry, especially something as basic as ionization tendencies. It's one of those topics that just doesn't click for him no matter how much he looks at it. Haimiya listens, then gives that familiar, confident smile and tells him not to worry, she'll handle it. And the next moment, she goes all in. Without hesitation, she grabs his notebook and starts writing quickly, filling the page with a full chart. It's detailed, organized, and way more intense than Kurose expected. Then she casually tells him to just memorize it like it's nothing. Kurose immediately panics seeing the amount of information, but Haimiya shuts that down instantly with a strict tone. At that point, he has no choice but to accept his fate. Still, even in the middle of this strict teaching style, the mood stays light. Kurose points out that this is the first time they've ever actually studied together, and it feels a bit new to him. Curious, he asks if she's good at chemistry. Haimiya answers casually that she's part of the science track, like it's not a big deal. That surprises him more than anything. She didn't look like the type who would be serious about academics, but once again, she breaks his expectations. Then she leans slightly, resting her face in her hand, and tells him that he can ask her anything he doesn't understand, but warns him she's strict. Kurose just ends up staring for a second, completely caught off guard by how confident she looks in that moment. Honestly, moments like this show a different side of her that's easy to miss at first. As they continue, Kurose notices something written on her notebook. Her full name, Mio Haimiya. He reads it out loud and points out the meaning behind the kanji, mentioning how it connects to something beautiful like cherry blossoms. That unexpectedly flusters her. She turns away, trying to brush it off, but it's obvious she didn't expect him to notice something like that. Kurose, without overthinking it this time, just says that the name suits her. It's simple, but the way he says it feels genuine, and that hits harder than he realizes. For a second, Haimiya just freezes. It's not some dramatic reaction, but it's clear that line caught her off guard in a way she didn't prepare for. Kurose doesn't push it further, but you can tell he's starting to get more comfortable speaking honestly without hiding behind hesitation. They keep talking, and naturally the topic shifts. Haimiya asks about his first name, something they somehow never discussed before despite everything they've been through. Kurose is surprised, but it makes sense. They always met in the same limited setting, and some basic things just never came up. Instead of asking directly again, Haimiya turns it into a game. She starts guessing his name, throwing out random options with full confidence. None of them are even close, and Kurose can't help but react every time. The guesses get more ridiculous as she goes on, clearly enjoying herself more than actually trying to figure it out. At that point, it's less about the answer and more about teasing. Eventually, Kurose gives in. In a quiet moment, with the sunlight hitting just right, he finally tells her his name, Ao. There's something calm about the way it's revealed. Nothing dramatic, just a simple moment that feels meaningful because of how naturally it happens. And when Haimiya repeats it softly, calling him Ao-kun, it carries a completely different kind of weight. That's when things flip. Now it's her turn to tease him. She starts calling his name over and over again, leaning closer, poking his cheek, clearly enjoying how easily he gets flustered. Kurose has no defense against it. He tries to push back, but it just makes it worse. At some point, he realizes he's completely lost control of the situation, and then she reveals the reason. It's payback. That earlier moment when he said her name, Mio, so naturally, it stayed with her more than she let on. So this is her way of getting even. It's playful, but it also shows that what he said mattered to her. After that, they try to go back to studying, but the energy has already shifted. Kurose tries to focus, but then out of nowhere, she flicks his forehead. No warning, no explanation. He reacts instantly, confused and in pain, but she just acts like it's nothing. Then she sets a condition. If he doesn't memorize everything properly, she'll do it again. And just like that, the study session turns into something half serious, half chaotic. But somehow it works. They spend time
time like this, arguing, studying, teasing, and just talking. Nothing big happens, but it doesn't need to. The moment itself carries enough weight because of how natural it feels now between them. As the sun begins to set, the classroom is filled with warm light. Haimiya laughs freely without holding back, and Kurose, even while struggling, can't help but feel at ease. It's not perfect, and it's not polished, but it's real. That line about youth being reflected in the evening light fits perfectly here. Kurose, whose name literally means blue, feels like he's finally stepping into something new, something uncertain, but meaningful. And honestly, this part stands out because nothing dramatic is forced. It's just two people spending time together, slowly getting closer without realizing how much things have already changed.
In my opinion, this manga does something really well here. It doesn't rush the romance or force big dramatic moments. Instead, it focuses on small misunderstandings, awkward honesty, and gradual change. And because of that, when moments like this happen, they actually feel earned rather than forced.